Okay, please state your full name for the record.
Sylvia Washington Ba.
Okay, thank you. When and where were you born?
In Washington, D.C. in 1937.
Where did you grow up?
In Washington, D.C. in what is now called Adams Morgan, which was not called Adams Morgan when I was a child. And then I moved out into the North Brookland area in 1952 and came to Trinity in 54.
How would you describe your childhood and teenage years prior to college?
How would I describe them?
Yes.
I had a large family. I was an only child, but my mother had siblings and they had children, and I had looking back, a wonderful childhood. I went to D.C. public schools. It was, as you know, until 1954, segregated. So these were all schools for black children.
Right. Did your parents or guardians work outside of the home?
Yes, my dad worked at the Federal Reserve Board in various capacities because whatever job he was in, someone would remark that this person can do better, and they just moved him up through the years. So his entire employment here was at the Federal Reserve Board. When I went to school in kindergarten, first grade, my mother began substitute teaching in the D.C. public schools.
When you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A teacher, always. I never had another aim in life.
Is there any specific thing that had you gravitate towards teaching, or any moment in your life?
No, I just loved school. And I had an old maid aunt who was teaching and was a registrar in Mississippi in one of those schools established during Reconstruction. And I had wonderful kindergarten, especially kindergarten, second and fifth grade teachers. So it was just nurtured all along.
Right. What brought you to Trinity, and was Trinity your first choice?
When I graduated from high school, strangely enough, I did not want to go away. I think I was not very adventurous.
Right.
I did not want to go away. But I did not want to go to Howard either, because many of my male cousins went to Howard. Some were in sociology, some were in med school, and they all lived with us at some point. So there was a Howard presence.
Right.
And then I had been taking piano lessons since age 9, and by the time I got to high school, I had a professor who was in the music department at Howard. And so I ended up with him, and as a freshman and junior here at Trinity, I had my music lessons in the music department at Howard, so I saw the students there.
Right.
And I just, for all those reasons, had no... Also, I was not sorority-minded, and I was too much of a bookworm, I think, to value dressing up for homecoming and, all that. So my mother said, well, if you don't want to go away and you don't want to go to Howard, there's that Catholic school right up the street. So my dad called up and he spoke to Sister Mary Lawler, history professor who was at the time the director of admissions. And we came up and we visited, and that's how I came to Trinity.
Yeah, so you stated that you did have a lot of family members that attended college in Howard. Were you the first person to graduate from college in your family?
No.
Okay.
No.
So everyone that attended did graduate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
My mother had 2 years of teachers college in St. Louis.
Got it.
Yeah.
How would you describe your experience at Trinity?
It was wonderful. It was interesting. It was, I was the third African American to come here. And these are the first two. Harriet Parker, I never met.
Okay.
I never saw her here, and it leads me to believe she may be deceased by now. Frances Carter on the bottom,
Right.
I knew.
Okay.
She was a year ahead of me. I knew her. She is now deceased. And so I was the third African American to come to Trinity. In my class, there was also a classmate of mine from Dunbar High School, but the classmates didn't know she was African American because she had blonde hair and blue eyes.
Oh, wow.
So we both came together from the same high school.
Right.
And when we entered, in our first class meeting, they decided that we didn't know one another well enough to elect officers. So they would elect a 4-person committee until we could move into regular officers. And so they nominated me, one of the 4, and asked us to leave. But Marie, who was the other African-American, blonde and blue eyes,
right.
I mean, nobody knew she was African-American,
Right.
so she heard everything. And they said, well, and we ought to put Sylvia Washington on there. So, we want her to feel welcome. And so we'll put her on the committee, and, so we won't think we're prejudiced or anything.
Right.
So that's how I ended up on the freshman committee.
And there's actually a term for that was used for her, passing at that point.
But she wasn't. As I had several. There were lots of friends in D.C. public schools like that. And one of them said to me, she said, "Well, I can't walk around with a sign on."
Right.
If it comes up.
Then she did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we kept saying we were from the same high school, and they finally the local girls finally figured it out.
Okay.
But these girls had no experience with biracial people, and with it was black and white. They were just naive little Catholic girls.
Did you experience any challenges as a woman of color at Trinity?
No. I got very warm welcomes from everybody, including the domestic employees. When I was there, over in is there still a cafeteria?
Yes.
Under alumni?
I know we just have the main cafeteria.
I don't know, but anyway, there was something called the smoker because the girls smoked in the day, and that was under the dining hall in alumni. And I did not live on campus.
Okay.
We were called day hops. So we just ate in the smoker if we ate on campus, but we were not in boarders.
Right.
So the ladies who worked in the cafeteria were so excited to have another African American. And I liked raspberry sherbet ice cream. So, they had the dip, and when you dip it up, they would just put it in, and then they just drag it to get more and more, and they gave me these huge servings of They all had different ways of saying, "We're so glad you're here."
Right.
So there was that. There was an all-purpose gentleman who was married with a family and who had worked here, if I'm not mistaken, since he was 18 years old. His name was Paul Proctor. Whatever you needed, repairs, anything you called. When they moved the main library from Maine, and they had built this one here.
Right.
And he came to me and said, Sylvia, you want some shelves? The bookcases? I said, sure. He got a truck and he brought me 2 huge, those are library bookcases, not for home.
Right.
And he brought me 2. He said, you want anything else? I said, no, this is fine. So I have those. But they just did everything for me. I also got to know everybody in all classes because I had a scholarship from the National Negro Scholarship Fund, something like that. I had that. And then I had an assistantship here. So I don't know if you still have that in this library, the reserve desk, where you have assignments and you have to sign up to read the book.
Yeah.
Okay. I worked Saturdays from 12 to 6 for 4 years. Then I came back in the summers, and I worked in the library in the summer. Right. And so Sister Helen Sheehan, this is named, was the main librarian, and the assistant librarian was she was Frances Mary at the time, and then they took their real names back, and she became Sister Dorothy Beach. And so working in the library during the school year and during the summers, I was ready for research. They just trained me.
Right.
So I majored in French, and we had a French woman who lived in Baltimore and who came over 3 times a week on the train, and she would have us each year to her home at the end of the school year for a dinner with wine and all this French food. And a very interesting thing happened because I never encountered any kind of prejudice in this group of, French majors. But in the late 90s, one of the French majors who became a nun and who came to visit, and she said, we never told you this when we were in class. She said, and she named this girl who was a French major and who was a local, lived in Chevy Chase. And she had made the remark, said, oh, my mother would die if she knew I was in class with a black girl. But nobody ever said that to me. Right. And she never, right. She was a senior and I was an underclassman, so, But that I only learned in the 90s, and we graduated in 1958.
Right, so a lot of it was just kind of happening behind your back.
Yeah, there was no overt. Yeah.
Right.
And it was all the black people on campus, whatever their capacity, who just went all out.
Right.
So that was interesting. But I met, being on the reserve desk, I met all the classes, all the majors, all the professors, because they would have to sign these books out.
Right.
Yeah.
So you talked a lot about the relationships that you developed on campus with different faculty members and students. But is there any one faculty member or administrator that that you had a strong relationship with?
All of them, because for a while I was secretary for Sister Anne Francis, who was the Dean of Women at the time. Then Sister Mary Lawler, who was admissions director when I came in, she was doing her PhD at Catholic U, and she was doing it on a French philosopher, and she had all these French references. And so she hired me to type her dissertation and to read her sources to be sure that she had interpreted them properly. Her sources were on French microfilms, which were horizontal, and American microfilm readers were vertical. So I had to go to the biology lab and read her French microfilms under microscopes, which I did. And I would tell her, okay, this is right, this is not right, this is good. And then I typed it on the second floor in Alumni Hall. So that was my third job. And I would type and I would type. And the maids on that hall, there was a mother-daughter combination. And they would bring me cookies. And they would bring me, you want a Coke? You need anything? I said, no, I'm fine. They were named Dorothy and Hattie. And Hattie, who was the mother, said to me one day, oh, Sylvia, you is the first who have teached here. And I thought to myself, well, we see why. But they were wonderful. We stayed friends. When I graduated, they all sent me cards and just everything.
Was there one memorable piece of advice that you got from a mentor or your many mentors?
No, because there were so many.
Right.
It was just hard to single out one.
You were very popular.
Well,
what?
I should add another, which adds a bit to the understanding. I was born in Washington, lived in Washington, and I was here for the school years. But from age 2 to age 21, I spent all my summers with my paternal grandmother in upstate New York, which meant that I went back and forth between a segregated society and an integrated society. So when I came here, I had been accustomed all my life to being around people of the other race or anything else, and it was not like coming from segregated DC into a white school because I had that experience growing up.
What did you do after receiving your undergrad degree from Trinity?
Okay, I have to tell you one thing about my graduation.
Okay.
And this is from Jet Magazine. You can keep that.
All right.
Because I was the first African-American valedictorian. And that made all the papers. And the people in our neighborhood, when we had moved in, one lady had said, well, they just don't live like we do. But then when the papers all came out, she decided, well, maybe they're doing better than we. And this is really old style. When we graduated, we had what was called the rose chain. And we all dressed in white, and we had this procession to the graduation, which I think was held under the chapel. And on my way over in the procession, this little ancient black lady came running up to me. She said, I just had to come. I just had to see you because you have done what I couldn't. And she was weeping, and I thought, but, when you're the first or the second or the third, it's still,
Right.
Yeah. So now what was your question you asked me?
I'm going to pause first. Okay. Well, what did you do after receiving your undergrad degree at Trinity?
Well, when I graduated, I got a Fulbright grant and also a Woodrow Wilson grant. And so I told the Woodrow Wilson people that as a French major, I should go to France. But can I use your grant when I come back? And they said yes. So I went to France for a year at the University of Bordeaux. And then I came back. That was 58, 59. 59, 60. I came back and went to grad school at Fordham University in New York. And I lived at International House. And I was there from 59, 60. And then I came to teach at Trinity in 61.
Oh, you came back. Okay. What professional accomplishments are you most proud of?
first of all, doing well here. Being a student here was one thing, but to come back from France and, I taught language classes first, and then I moved up to literature and seminars and things like that. So I was very proud of that they had trained me. They knew what they were getting, but they gave me the chance, and I was proud of that worked well for everybody.
Right. So beyond professional, what personal accomplishment were you most proud of?
Surviving in Senegal in their education. Because I came to Trinity. I taught here from 61 to 64, 63, 64. Then I got a grant from American Association of University Women, and I used that to go do research in Paris for my degree. And then I came back to Trinity, and I was here from 64 to 67 teaching. And in 67, I got my PhD. I can't remember all of this. Yes, that's why I have this, because this was a long time ago. In 67, I got my PhD, and I went to Senegal to research what I had already done before publishing. So I went back in 67. I took a leave of absence from here, scheduled to come back at the end of the year, except I went to Senegal, and you meet somebody, and so I had to ask the authorities there, can I stay another year? I have to see about this. And so I did, and I got married in 69. And my husband was assigned as press attaché to the Senegalese embassy. So I came back here in 69 and stayed until 73. So I was back at Trinity from 69 to 73. And then in 73, we went, and my son was born, and we went back to Senegal. And then I taught at the University of Dakar from 73 to 2002, coming back here in the summers. So I think what I was professionally most proud of was setting up the first women's studies in the French department at the University of Dakar, because there were none. And I was teaching French literature, and the French professor who was doing comparative literature went back to France, and they said, oh, that's too bad, this was really taking off, but now we have nobody to teach it. And I said, oh, yes, you do. I said, you have to be bilingual to do comparative lit, Right. And they said, oh, you want it? I said, tomorrow, I'm ready. So I said, well, what would you like me to teach? And what did they say this for? Anything you want. I did women's studies, comparative lit. I did Toni Morrison, Alice Walker. Then I did Assia Jabbar from Algeria, Maurice Condé from Guadeloupe. I just put everybody in. And we had exchange students from American universities. And they all took my classes. And I said, you people came to Senegal. Go with the Senegalese professors. They said, what you're teaching, we can't get in the States. And so that became, and I had guys taking it. Senegal is a majority Muslim country. And I had all these guys taking this course. And we said such scandalous things in it that I had to ask a colleague who had an institute in one of the back rooms, And I said, I have to get off this main corridor because what we are saying in here is too scandalous. And so he lent me a room, and I moved the whole course there. But I was most proud of starting women's studies and making that succeed.
How do you hope to be remembered?
I have no idea. I have all my students keep up with me. I had quite a few women students doing master's and doctoral degrees, and I directed those, and they all stay in contact, and they kind of never let you go.
Right.
And then students that when I came back here to teach, and my mother stayed home to be with my son until he was 2. Then when he was 2, they said here, okay, you people with young children, we're going to have students who want to babysit, $1 an hour. And so I brought him up here and had all these Trinity students taking care of him, $1 an hour. One of them became literally a family member. She went to Senegal. When we went back to Senegal, she said, can I come? I said, yeah, okay. And she came, and then she joined Peace Corps. She did everything to stay there. So some of the students that I had here, I still see regularly. My students in Dakar, I see them because I've been going back every summer since I left. Since I retired in 2002, so anyway.
Can you tell me about 1 or 2 historical moments that occurred while you were at Trinity that moved you emotionally? It's a while ago. I don't know which one's the most. I can't do most. Right. Just whatever comes back. When I was expecting my son, and they had a baby shower for me, and all of the ladies who worked in the food service, they all came to me and they said, since we have been here, Sister, what's her name, has never taken the silver service out. You were the first person that they have put the whole silver service out for your shower. And I thought, well, why? I mean, that's colleagues, getting together. But and there was always a tendency for people to go a bit further, just to show, but that was kind of moving, that, and the nuns all knitted all these baby clothes, and it was it was more than just a faculty baby shower. Right.
But there were so many moments, and so many interactions, and that's so long ago.
Right. And it's okay if you don't remember for this question. What do you consider the most significant civil rights or social justice event in your lifetime? So it doesn't have to be just at Trinity,
No, all the voting rights, everything connected with voting rights. My dad, when they had the march on Salena, my mother's sister was gravely ill with cancer, and she had gone to St. Louis to be with her. And I was living at home, and my dad was saying, oh, I want to go to Selma. I just wish I could go. But he wouldn't go because, But just all that civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. And then in 1964, April of 1964, I was in Senegal. I was in camp, I was in Saint-Louis for the big anniversary celebration. And we went with all the big dignitaries, and we had the seats of honor on the presidential dais, and that is when we got the news about Dr. King being assassinated on April 4th, 1964, was it?
Right.
68, yeah, 1968. And then Senghor, who was the president of Senegal, and who was also an academic and a poet. I wrote my dissertation on him. And he wrote an elegy on Martin Luther King. So when Princeton University published my doctoral dissertation, and I included in it some unpublished poems, which I translated from French into English, one of which was this elegy to Martin Luther King. Yeah.
What does the world need to know about Trinity and Trinity alumni?
There are two Trinities. There's the Trinity that I came into in 1954. And there's the Trinity that had it stayed what it was, which was an upper class Catholic girls' school. The doors would have shut.
Okay.
They asked me, one of my classmates was on the alumni board, and she had served her 2 terms. And she called me and she said, "I'm leaving, I want you to take my spot." This was in 2009. So I said, "Well, okay, alumni board, what do you have to do?" But all the back and forth about what Trinity was, but it's no longer, but this is what it should be doing. And so I was in that for 2 terms. From 2019 to 2015, I was on the alumni board. And that was interesting to see, because that was, at one point, we had 2 alumni journals. One was for the traditionalists, and one was for the progressives.
Right.
So I was participating in all of that. But, I taught Pat McGuire. She took French. I taught Pat McGuire. I taught, don't ask me names. The one who was Secretary of Health at HEW. Okay. Anyway. And I taught lots of these luminaries, who became, political forces and so, that's why I say there are 2 Trinities. There was the original Trinity founded by the Sisters of Notre Dame, and then there is Trinity of today, championed by Pat McGuire, who is a force of nature.
So, do you feel like the change was positive in a way, or do you feel like they could have preserved a little bit of the legacy that was before? How do you feel?
I think, given society in America today, Trinity is what is needed.
Okay.
You don't need elite intellectuals. You need activists. You need people who are committed, people who are, I don't want to say this, but woke.
Can't with that term.
No, but you can delete that one. But anyway, I mean, where are the needs? Who is equipped to do something about it? People who go to an institution there's a place for everybody. There's a place in the Ivy League. My son went to Ivy League. But there's a place for Trinity. The proof. Look at how Pat makes it work. it can be done if you have dedicated people.
What was life's biggest obstacle for you, and did your Trinity sisters help provide support? It's okay.
I have lived such a charmed life. You know, I didn't plan out anything. I would go along, and something would happen. I mean, Sister Joan Bland asked me when I was a junior, Sylvia, do you want to go to grad school? I said, yeah. She said, okay, this is what you have to do. And, you know, she said, yo, you apply for this, you apply for that, this is what you need. And, yeah. And so all along the way, I would encounter somebody who would say, oh, well, you want to do this? Or I didn't plan any of it. When I went to Senegal the first time, everybody's mouth was hanging open because I was not a back to Africa person. I was not wearing dashiki. You know, none of that. And they said, Sylvia going to Africa? Not Sylvia. My mother said, yes, she is. So I don't know. I always digress from your...
But what is one vital piece of evidence you would give to the current Trinity students?
Evidence of what?
Oh, sorry, advice.
Oh, advice? Whatever, don't give up. Don't give up. Fight for it. Do it. What do you hope the current and future Trinity students will do going forward to preserve the legacy of Trinity? Profit from what they learned. Go out into society and show the world what they're capable of. And never give up.
What is, in your opinion, Trinity's most precious historical legacy?
Faith in women. From the foundress who said we're going to have a girls' college and who fought with Catholic U people to do it, to the people up to today.
And lastly, what do you hope for Trinity to achieve in the next 50 years?
Whatever their goals are.
Somebody said stay open.
I think they will.
Yeah.
I think that there's enough behind it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you think they'll stay open, like being in all girls, or do you think they'll have to switch over to co-ed?
It's already co-ed.
Well, in a way.
In a way, yeah. But the biggest thing we had when I was here was MAT program for teachers. Mm-hmm. DC teachers could come in. That was the first opening. Mm-hmm. And then even the Alumni Association. When we said Trinity Alumni AE. But then the guys came in. We had one guy on the board. Oh, he was fabulous. I wonder what happened to him. But so then we had to, all the Latinists said, you know, it's your association accounts only for women. So then we had to put the I instead of the AE. Well, both. We had /AEI. As far as I know, because I left, I got off the board, and I did 2 terms. I got off in 2015. I thought it was later, but anyway. There was one guy on the board, and there were people in the professional schools. That was a rough task, because the people in professional schools had families, they were working, they didn't have time for all these little, alumni dues and right. events, and so it was hard to get them to feel the alumni part of it. Mm-hmm. Once they left, they got their degree, oof, and they, mm-hmm. But that was being worked on when I got off the board. Yeah.
Thank you.